And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. We are recording live, and we are on whatever platform you're watching us on, YouTube and on Facebook. So we want to just say hi to everybody on the platform. And with me in studio is none other than Katie Sass. Katie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Just a little bit cold.
It is, yeah. If we look cold, that's because we are cold. And thankfully, about an hour ago, Katie, it was about high 40s, low 50s, and I was like, dadgummit. And I had to do a meeting in the Live for More Center because I was like, this is way.
Because you were a little wuss.
I was a wuss, but there was a small child, and the small child had to, watch TV somewhere while we talked. So, So anyway, this is really cold. And we're on the weekend of Martin Luther King weekend. Did you do anything like special or anything for Martin Luther King weekend?
I did not.
Yeah.
Do people do
Well,
that?
you could go down on the east side. They usually do some sort of march on East Austin. If you go down like 12th, or is it Chicon, where there's this huge mural. It's right outside Eastside Community Church. They usually do some sort of thing.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But we did take the day off to celebrate and talk about how our civil rights history and how awesome it is that we live in a free and equal land. But one of the things that's wild is that we actually talked about, and I wish I would have thought like I planned this, but I didn't. We talked about slavery in the Bible on Sunday on Martin Luther King weekend, which is always sort of a fun thing to think about. And it went okay. We kind of talked about it. I think what's really hard about these laws in Exodus is that they're just not super applicable when you talk about civil laws, or like don't boil a kid in his mother's milk, and you're like, I don't even own a goat. I think there's a lot of struggle with that.
Don't boil a kid in their mother's milk.
Mm-hmm. A kid, like a kid goat.
Oh, I was like, where is that in the Bible?
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about like
an actual kid? Well, they actually have laws about don't burn your child. That is actually.
Well, no, I know, but I just was like, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. In its mother. Yeah, mother's milk. What verse is that exactly? That would be.
That's in Exodus?
No, it's Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 14:21. It's kind of a fun one for everybody. But we're in a lot of these laws. In chapter 21 specifically, it has laws on slavery, capital punishment, restitution for malicious intent, restitution for negligence, and then chapter 22 is going to get into restitution for breaking and entering, restitution for. I mean, it's wild.
Are we doing every chapter?
We're doing it.
No.
But you listen.
This is the longest sermon series we have ever done.
No, we have done longer.
Ever.
But at least you get to know what's in the Bible. Did you not want to know that part?
Well, no, I feel like I just read it. I don't know. It's just like.
I'm not judging.
I feel like I'm just ready for a new thing.
We're going to move on eventually. But here's what's important. When you read the Old Testament and you get to like the slave laws, how do you read them? And I think this is one of the reasons why I felt it was important for us to kind of go through this, because I think, and this might be where you think differently, but you get to sort of show how someone can read the Bible devotionally. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is we sort of just, when we get to those parts of the Bible, you go, boring, move on. And I think there is spiritual depth because it clearly is God's word. Now, is it God's word that we need to talk about? Is that your go-to verse, slave laws? No, but I do think it has great value for you to know, one, where it is, because it is God's word. Two, how it can apply to your life, even if there is a cultural disconnect that's so broad that we don't do slavery, and that's actually God's heart, which is even better, right? So I feel like that's where we get to show, like, because I think so much of the time people look at the Old Testament and they either go, clearly that God is disconnected from the God of the New Testament.
Well,
Do you not see that? Do you not ever hear people that are like, they go, that can't be the same God, and we need to unhitch
I just
ourselves
ignore
from the Old
those
Testament?
people because they just think they know what they're talking about, and they're really stupid.
You know what I appreciate about you, Katie? You just follow me blindly. I love it. It's pretty great. Or am I
I
just
don't. You think I'm following you blindly?
Yeah, clearly.
No.
All right. Well, I appreciate that.
I'm following God. I don't know blindly, but I'm just like.
Okay. Well, but okay.
I'm not gonna listen
But don't you ever have conversations with people who doubt the Old Testament?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I just go, okay.
Okay, but okay. So anyway, what I guess my heart is.
I'm not gonna try to prove anything to them. Like.
That's fair.
Whatever.
That's fair. Yeah. All right. Well, so you may. Okay. I appreciate that you're like. Well, here. Let me tell you the reason.
Like, I'm a boring debater. Like, you can try to debate me, but I'm not gonna fight you.
Yeah. You're like, okay.
I'll fight you on other things, but when it comes to the
what
Bible,
will you fight me on?
Oh man, now you're putting me on the spot.
Well, you're fighting me on the importance of.
Well, I guess I'll just
preaching
bring up
through the Exodus 21 and slave laws.
like last week I wrote a blog about parenting.
Oh.
About like Ava's like sleep terror, just the season of awful.
Yeah.
And I wrote about how like she used to slam her face into the crib railing to get us to stay in there and like to get us to come back, because like she realized that if we started walking out of the room and she slammed her forehead against the railing, that we would come back in a panic and check on her. And so she did that all the time. And then whenever we stopped coming back, then she would flail backwards and slam the back of her head against the crib, against the other side of the wall, to where we eventually had to pad her crib because she was thrashing so hard about having to go to bed. Like, she was so pissed that we would have the audacity to care about her sleep that she would slam her body against the crib in rebellion. And so we ended up having to just ignore it, like, to get it to stop. Because we're like, clearly she's doing this for attention. Clearly she's doing this because there's nothing wrong with her. Like we're like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, stop acting like this. And so I wrote in there all of the responsive, like, I don't even remember what I said. There are going to be a lot of responsive sleeper moms that are going to say, she's not being manipulative. There's a need that needs to be met, and da-da-da. And I said, I will fight you. Like, you did not live that.
Right.
You didn't live that. And you don't know my child.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think
So that's where you're going to go to the mat.
that's where I will fight you.
Parenting.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
But when it comes to the Bible, believe it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
Like,
but
it's not.
okay.
That's not my problem that
Sure.
you don't believe it.
Fair enough.
I'm going to tell you about it, but like, I don't have the power to change your mind. So
Okay.
I'm not going to look like an idiot
All right.
trying
all
to
right.
prove
But you
something
have
to
been
you.
reading through the Bible.
Yes.
Where are you at right now?
1 Kings.
So, and you've had to make it through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Yes. So we started Exodus shortly after I just finished it.
Wow.
And I was so relieved when I was done, because I'm like, oh, finally Moses died and we can like go to a different dude. Like, I can learn about, like, now we're at Joshua. Like, yay, we can like, and then we start Exodus here. And I'm like, dear Lord, baby Jesus, I just read this and I have been dying to get into a new book.
But wouldn't it be helpful if you could, when you read the scripture, you weren't just like trying to get through it, but you were looking to find Jesus?
No, I
within
wasn't
it?
trying to get through it. It's because I'm reading it.
Because
but
when
I
you
was
read
relieved.
Exodus, it's not like you're done. You got to go to Leviticus
Yeah.
and then Numbers. And it's kind of like telling the same story over and over. In fact, then Deuteronomy, second law, it's like doing it all over again.
Or wait, when does Moses die again? What's before Joshua?
No, he does. He dies at,
Because I'm like, wait, now you're confusing me.
yeah. He died, like you read about Moses' death, I think, in Numbers. But then Deuteronomy, probably the same thing. Maybe it's there as well, Deuteronomy. Let me fight. I think it's probably Deuteronomy.
Anyways, now I can't remember what I've read, but I was excited to move on to something new.
Yeah, it's Deuteronomy.
And so I'm like, I'm just, okay, no. maybe not when I finished Exodus. We started Exodus when I read the chapter of Moses dying. And so is that the end of Deuteronomy? Okay, so that's where I was. So I had just lived the life with Moses. Okay? And so then I'm coming to church, and now I got to do it all over again. I'm like, I was just hanging out with Moses, okay, for a bunch of weeks. And so now I'm just like, golly, like, what's next?
All right. What would you want to hear next?
Judges, for sure.
We preached through Judges.
When?
The whole thing.
You probably did, but
back in the day when you were a young believer.
Yeah, probably. But actually, what was really cool is 1st and 2nd Samuel. Like, I text you and I said, if they made this a movie, Hollywood wouldn't need to add anything.
Right.
It'd be rated R on its own.
That's true. All right. Well, back to this particular sermon.
Okay. What was it about again?
Do you remember? So it was about slavery. It said, these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th, he shall go out free for nothing. Which to me is like, this is wild. They're talking about slavery as the very first thing right after the Decalogue or the 10 Commandments. Like, okay, now this is from you. You're like, I don't care. But, like, is there any party that thinks that's interesting at least? Like, why would you do that? Or is it just like, you had a list of things, throw them on there, and whatever hits the wall sticks, and we'll go with that?
I think I would just go with it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, I can appreciate that. Well, to me, it was awesome because what it says is God cares about the least of the people by putting them first in priority of who gets law protection. And so I thought that was very fascinating. If the First Amendment was we're going to take care of the poorest of the poor, that would say a lot about what the nation stands for. Do you know what our First Amendment is?
Is it freedom of speech?
Yeah,
or,
there we go.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah,
I was like, it's either that or guns.
Well, the fact that you know that is pretty amazing. I mean, not.
Oh, thanks.
No, that's not to say that you're dumb, but most people don't know what our First Amendment is. But what they do know is that that we're a country based on freedom, right? Like that. Like, if you were to say, what's probably the main thing of our country? It's liberty or freedom. Like that's kind of our slogan.
Even though so many idiots in the world think we don't have freedom, but whatever.
Yeah, well.
Go to another country. Go to the Middle East.
That's true. That's where it's very illegal to be a Christian. Okay, so that is sort of like the primary thing for America was freedom. The primary thing here is something way different and way more unique, and this is where is it even a priority? But the whole point is like there is the social class of a person does not determine his value, and a person should be treated as a brother even if they are a slave, and that's sort of mind blowing. Which is then goes back to Galatians, of like there's neither slave nor free, Greek or Jew, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free. All for Christ is all and is in all. Like he is. That makes us equal, even though in our social strata, we are probably not equal among peers or whatever.
That's why I had such a hard time with titles.
You have a hard time with what?
Like, I don't care what your title is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
like,
you do have a hard time with that. It's good for you.
I'm going to just treat you how I feel like you should be treated. But... Yeah, I'll admit that that's a struggle of mine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how high up you are in a company. Like, if you're a jerk, like,
you get jerk treatment.
I'm not gonna respect you. Like, okay, cool.
All right, that's good. All right, well, how about like if the president were to walk in, would you be like, Joe, we've got issues, and we need to talk?
I wouldn't be purposefully rude.
Okay.
But I don't think I would, like, stand and, like, shake his hand or something.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Yeah, I would. I definitely want to meet the guy. And if he would sit down and talk with me, I'd share with him all the things I think we could do better. But I feel like...
See, I'd love to have coffee with Trump.
Tell me why.
He's just interesting. He's a little more fun. Like, I feel like a coffee date or, like, some sort of, like... I don't know. It'd be just fun.
He is fun. In Iowa, Did you follow the Iowa caucus?
The caucus?
Do you know what that is?
I don't know what a caucus is.
All right, the Iowa caucus is where and they do it weird in Iowa. It's where you kind of like elect your people, and you finally come to your primary person. And Donald Trump, I think, got like 51%, and it's over. So, not a big shock, I don't think, from anybody's perspective. But it's just sort of wild. It's kind of how they do the primary. So, and then they, what's interesting is that the way the Democrats do it is they go to like a big gym, and if you want to vote for somebody, you have to go sit in their section. Mm-hmm. And then they look across, they go, ooh, Biden has this many people, Williamson has this many people, Phillips has this many people. Ah, man, Williamson doesn't look like he got too many. So everybody that's in Williamson's camp, you got to go sit in Biden's section or Phillips' section. That's literally how you physically have to go. You have to show up and you go sit somewhere, and then they count butts and seats literally for the primaries for the Democrats. It's kind of fun.
Huh.
Yeah, it's sort of wild. Anyway,
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So back to what we were talking about. We're really struggling to stay focused here.
It's because this freaking air conditioning is on above us.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the cooking vent, like when you're cooking dinner. I don't know. Do you ever do that? Do you ever cook dinner?
Yeah.
Where there's
the
smoke vent is above you, and it's just going forever,
Yeah.
and then you turn it off, and it's almost like your brain releases this like sense of relief.
Yeah.
This like, oh, maybe I don't want to burn the house down.
Really? That makes you want to burn the house down?
It is. It just is so. It's so overstimulating.
Well, so we have Is
Adrian like that? I feel like Adrian would be like
She is like that? Oh, totally like that. But for some reason, that sound does not bother her. Every other sound in the whole world does. Because we have a noise machine to go to sleep at night. We also just had 11 puppies last night. And so you would think our house sounds like the house had 11 puppies last night. But when you turn or a noise machine on, you can sleep right through it. It's no big deal.
Right.
So, but when you turn it off, it does feel like someone took like a vice off your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so back to your sermon.
Yes.
Okay.
That you were so intrigued by.
Clearly.
Do you remember anything of it?
If I think really hard.
Like I did talk about Iraq a little bit. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
Well, do you remember what I did? No.
I just think you need to stop asking me hard questions.
Well, no, listen. I'm just listen. If the student hasn't learned, the teacher hasn't taught. So this is where
But I don't think that rule can apply to me because I can zone out in anything.
Fair enough. So one of the biggest things, like leaders eat last, is sort of like one of the things that we talk about in the military all the time.
Oh, I do remember when you talked about that.
Yeah. So I flew. Like I had this. It was like a cool trip. I mean, first off, flying on helicopters anywhere is awesome. But I flew on a helicopter from where I was outside of Fallujah to Baghdad. And the whole time I'm flying across the Iraqi airspace, I'm thinking we're going to get like an air-to-ground missile or ground-to-air missile and just get destroyed. But we made it. Mm-hmm. And we get there. I testify against this terrorist. And then they had Pizza Hut in Baghdad, which I was not aware of. And I was very excited about. And I got a pizza for me, and I ate it that night. And then I went and bought like 4 or 5 more and shoved them into a cooler, brought them onto a helicopter on the way back, and we're having to fly, pretty high, but then low and high. And so you're just wondering how your pizza is going to make it. And they all made it fine. And we get back and we gave the pizzas to the lowest ranking guy. You don't just give it to like, hey, officers first, then the NCOs, then the,
and was that just you, or is that like a general policy?
Just general rule.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want, but you'll be a complete dirtbag. There were times like when we were handing out food, I would have nothing because the mess hall worker that was supposed to put the food in our truck didn't give us enough. However that. Yeah. And so the first sergeant and I had like a little scrap of like noodles, and that was it. Yeah. And I was like, all right. Good thing I brought an extra MRE.
It's so funny to like think that you were this like hardcore guy that talked to terrorists in the Army. I just like I can't like.
I had the same personality, so that makes it even more fun.
I just like can't see it.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
It's fun. I loved it. But you also got to remember, I loved like when stuff was exploding. I loved to charge into the fire. Let's go. You know.
Yeah. Your intensity was
Yeah.
probably very fitting
Yeah.
for those.
The intensity
situations.
matched. Yeah, it was fun. I got to be an airborne ranger. Not exactly something I ever thought I would be doing when I was a kid, but it was definitely one of the most valuable things ever. All right,
Yeah.
so
You
primary
gave the
thing
pizza.
was
You gave the pizza to the lowest.
yeah,
and
leaders eat last.
You applied it to the sermon.
And then I said, I kind of went to Jesus. So the way I did it devotionally is I said, listen, whenever you look at how God put the slaves first, Jesus, in a sense, said, listen, God put the slaves first in the Old Testament. And then Jesus says, you must be a slave yourself to serve others.
Yeah, we are slaves to God.
And I think that's, and then
Slaves
slaves
to
to
the
other
truth.
people because we are slaves to God. Whoever wants to be first must be last. Who wants to be greatest of all must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Now, does that push against you in any way? Do you get annoyed by that? Or is that like, yeah, I need to be serving more people?
No, I mean I think I do need to serve more people.
Yeah.
I think if you deny the fact that you could serve more people, then you're probably not serving anyone.
Right. Okay. And that's, I feel like this is where Jesus really, again, when he says the greatest must be the slave, he is really doing a economic, social equality thing without touching anybody's money, which is wild to me. Because I think this is where some people might say, well, this is obviously where Jesus is smashing at capitalism. I don't think so. He says whoever must be first, or whoever would be first, among you must be slave of all. So those with the most resources should come and serve people out of a heart of, because I'm of God, I'm not like the Gentiles, I do it differently, and I'm going to serve people out of the goodness that God has placed in my heart, not out of the state's desire for me to have less or everyone to have the same amount. And I think not even in heaven is it like that. Not that I need to make this like a pro-capitalism thing, but in heaven, there's going to be people who are in charge of 10 cities. Some people are in charge of 5 cities. Some people are in charge of a city. Some people are going to be like Sammy the sweeper cleaning the gold streets. So I don't know exactly how that's all going to work, but you're going to have different levels of responsibility based on how the rewards you've gotten here on earth. That's not new news to you.
We're gonna have jobs in heaven.
Yeah, you don't just get to like sleep on a cloud. You have to work. We were made for work. That was pre-fall. And so when we get to heaven, we're going to have some people in charge of
Wait,
10
where
cities.
is this?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't want a job.
What do you want?
I want to be in heaven where I'm heavenly and I get to relax and hang out with Jesus.
I think that sounds like if you go to Luke 19.
Okay.
And there's going to be so the whole parable, the parable of
Right.
the servant who does hey,
Tell me where the Bible says we'll have jobs in heaven.
we're going to have okay, man, I feel like this is where we need to
Yeah, you should tell me all about it because clearly I'm stupid.
you're not stupid. Let's pull up.
But no one has ever told me I'm going to have a job.
Well,
in
that
heaven.
okay. So not that why do you be good, but like part of there's reward in heaven. Some people are gonna be saved you've heard this.
But are they fun jobs? Like I don't even. What
Well,
what
it
is
is
the
perfect
deal?
Let's say let's say you worked at the perfect place and you were a perfect person. It would be, or at least a glorified person. It would be really.
So we'll
great
be
job.
happy about it.
Yeah, you're gonna love your job. Remember the.
But do we get to pick a job? Like what? Like what? Read the verse.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I can find. Okay, here's the city. All right. And the king said to him, "Well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in a very small matter. You have authority over 10 cities." Then the second one came and said, "Sir, your mina has made 5 minas." So the king said to him, "You would be 5 cities." And then another slave came and said, "Sir, here is the 1 mina I put away for safekeeping, a piece of cloth. For I was afraid." Blah blah blah. He said, "I will judge you by your own words, you wicked slave. You knew you did not. I was severe man, withdrawing that I didn't deposit and reap what I didn't sow. Why didn't you put my money in the bank?" And he's got angry. Anyway, and they took away everything. So
That explains nothing.
no, it does, because this is a parable Okay.
It's a parable about like some dude that didn't put
Okay, so
something
what's
in
the meaning of the
bank.
parable?
I don't know.
So there's heavenly rewards for earthly faith.
Right. What does
That
that
is-
have
and it's-
anything to do with having a job?
Well, if you're going to be over a city, if there's different cities that you're given, do you think how does a city run?
What kind of jobs are there going to be in heaven?
listen,
like what kind of CEO is going to be running this joint?
Jesus.
Well, what kind of jobs does he make for people?
Well,
I don't even know. Like this is news to me.
Okay, how about this? Remember when I said whenever James and John, this is the part in the sermon. James and John came to Jesus. They said, "Hey, Jesus, put us each at one at your left and one at your right when you come to your kingdom." What do you think that meant?
They're hanging out.
They wanted positions of authority and power.
Yeah,
Authority
and then
over
they were
who?
rejected.
Sure. Sort of. They said it's not his to grant, but the Father in heaven is going to decide who gets that.
Okay. You're still not
No.
giving any clarity
No,
on
what I'm saying-
where in the Bible does it say we'll have jobs in heaven?
What are you going to just float around and play a harp?
I'm going to hang out and have fun and just be happy and is it what else are you supposed to do in heaven?
You're supposed to do what Jesus tells you to do. So
Enjoy your day.
So you've got the
not
millennial.
have a job.
Hold on. During the millennial kingdom, which that's 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth, and then at the end of that 1,000 years, God's going to turn Satan loose. He's come deceive a bunch of people, and then Jesus is going to destroy them all.
Right.
You remember that part?
Yes.
So how do the cities run when you're living there in a glorified body with all the non-glorified people running around?
They just run. It just runs. Okay. It just we just exist in heaven and we're happy.
But like
And
you have it.
It's leisurely, right?
I mean, remember, if we're in Jesus, you're always resting, right? You are so angry at me. You're giving me the look like you're
Well, because you're not even giving any clarity
I
on this
am
idea that we're gonna have jobs in heaven.
Okay, gosh. Okay.
You read me some text that had no clarity. That
Okay.
actually just confused me even more. So
All right.
I can't be the only one that is caught off guard by this. Am I the only idiot that goes to our church? Like, does anybody else?
All right.
Is anybody else?
So
like,
we
wait,
are going to be
what
servants who serve Jesus. Revelation 22:3.
Right. Yeah. Serving.
What is that? Is that not work?
It's not a job.
How is that not a job? What do you define a job as?
You go to work. Like I'm a teacher. I'm a preschool teacher.
Okay.
Photographer.
Yeah.
I now sell Monet, which is hair and skincare.
Oh, nice.
As of like 2 days ago, I just thought maybe it'd be fun.
Okay. Excellent. So, all right. So,
Like I'm only gonna work if it's fun.
well, it's going to be you're working for Jesus, who's the best boss, and you'll be serving him, and that's pretty good.
But then why would he give us jobs?
Oh, gosh. Okay. All right. But
Like,
he created
if I
us
could be
to
a
work.
stay-at-home
Remember
wife,
Genesis?
I would. Like that's
Genesis
like,
2:15. Here, I want you to work. Here's the land.
and I get it. Like the Proverbs 31 woman, she worked and she helped to provide for her
In
family.
fact, how about this?
But like,
Jesus said that my Father is always working. Like, have you ever seen that?
yeah, because he's a man.
Commercial?
Father's work. If it was
Oh,
like,
hold on. You just said
the
because he's a man,
dudes-
he's always working. So
if
men
it's-
are gonna be working.
if
What are
the
women
men
gonna-
have jobs, why do the women have to have jobs too? Listen, I'm not a
Hey,
feminist.
listen, trad wives everywhere rejoice.
Don't
This is
don't
great.
give me a job. I don't want to work.
Okay, all right. I don't. Maybe he'll let you run the social media account.
Like if it's fun. If it's fun, I'll do it.
So the problem with the if it's fun, I'll do it. That puts you in charge.
Like I
You're
just want
a
to know.
servant just does what his master says.
I just
whereas-
want to know what sort of jobs are
Is
going
this
to
like,
be available.
Is this like a prerequisite before you get to heaven?
Well, no, I'm just kind of curious. Like, what sort of jobs are in heaven, anyways? Can I work at a bakery?
I
Like, is there?
I mean,
like, I'll make bread.
So here's the good news. We know from glorified bodies you can eat because in John chapter 21, whenever Jesus comes to the disciples on the shore, he eats food in his glorified body. So I guess you could eat it. I don't know if there's actually any taste buds going on anymore, or if they've been glorified, or if there's super taste buds and everything tastes great. I don't know how it works. All I know is
if you're saying we don't have taste buds in heaven, that's where you're losing me. Because what is heaven if we can't eat good food? Like, what is the...
Well, I don't even know if you're going to have sex in heaven. Like,
I guess that's true because we're not married in heaven. Like, no one's married in heaven.
Right. I mean, because, like, which wife would you be? Yeah, and that's where Jesus said, remember, because, like, what if you had multiple wives or
well, because I know that we like, Ryan and I aren't going to stay married in heaven because everyone, brother, sister, like, but, like, food, we gotta eat. Like,
well, not if you have a glorified body that doesn't ever decay.
But we can't ever, like...
Is heaven sounding more and more depressing to you?
Yeah, you're making it suck. Like,
I don't know. Listen, I think
why are you like downgrading
I'm
heaven?
not downgrading. I'm just trying to bring the truth.
Like, now, all of a sudden, I'm told that we're not going to be able to eat food,
no,
and I have to have a job in
I
heaven.
Said that you
like,
possibly could eat food because clearly Jesus ate food in a glorified body. You just won't
like,
need to eat
we
food.
won't have taste buds, and we'll
Well,
have to have jobs. Welcome to heaven.
You'll have glorified taste buds. Maybe you taste everything perfectly as it was designed, and you'll have perfect food, which makes it really probably way better. And you'll have infinite time to enjoy them. You know, ever been at like a coffee shop?
And you'll never. It's like calorie-free food.
Well, it kind of goes back to manna.
Okay.
You remember manna back?
Yeah, the bread that fell
nobody
from the
could
sky.
eat too much, and nobody could eat too little.
And if you gathered enough for the next day, then it was like it
Maggots.
would mold. Yeah.
Gross. All right. Whew. This podcast did not turn out the way
Well, you probably shouldn't have told me that I'm going to have a job in heaven.
All right. Well, hold on. I did have some questions that came up specifically since on Martin Luther King weekend. It is kind of interesting. Do you think here it was? Do you think it was offensive in any way when you impersonated a black pastor during your sermon? Do you remember when I did that?
It was not. I don't think it was.
Well, and Joel came up to me and while I was doing it, he was giving me the heart thing. You know, he does this, and he goes, I love you, and I was like, I love you too, Joel. Joel is our elder chairman, and
he's black.
And he's black.
Yeah.
And he's awesome.
What was DeShays was Wesley
offended? No.
So if the black people aren't offended,
well, right. I think the person probably wasn't from our church or might have been new to a church or whatever. And I can understand. Like, if you don't know me, that might be like.
Well, it's just kind of, it reminds me of like, and listen, I don't know who sent this in, so I might be saying something real rude and offensive. I have no idea. But it's like when the white people feel like they need to be offended for the black people. On
behalf of other people.
And it's like, they're not offended.
Right.
It was fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like.
Well, and I do a fair. I think I impersonate.
And it's not like you were. It's not like you were mocking.
Right. It was like
It was
this
like.
Is like I wish.
You thought he's cool. Like
yeah,
you.
I was like
the way they preach.
I wanted to be able to preach like that. In fact, like I listened to. It was weird. Here's what's great. So many black churches have like sermons on what shall I render, and it came from Psalm. Oh man. What psalm is it? Psalm 116, and it is so awesome. And I listened to sermon after sermon, and there wasn't like one. There might have been like 2 white pastors on all of YouTube that preached on it, and they were like not interesting at all. But every one of the black pastors I watched, I was loving it. It was like motivating.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge
like
I gave to
fire.
a predominantly whiter church is we don't ask that question.
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of the challenge. And is what challenged me. It's like, why don't we as a white? Okay, we're about 65, 70% white. As a white church, though, I hate to use that terminology. It sounds so like, I don't know what that is. But as a predominantly white church,
yeah,
like I wonder why, and I haven't ever heard in any of my. I've never given that sermon until I preached it then, and I hadn't heard any other churches do it. But like, in general, in history, whites have been predominantly better off, and they're not asking the question, what shall I render? And then I thought, oh, at the churches I was watching, these were not like churches were like big money churches. This was like humble churches, and they were going all about, what shall I render to the Lord for what he, and I was like, it moved me. In fact, I did write a song about it. Can I say? No.
Oh. Okay, fine.
Well, but I just
Sing
wrote a couple verses.
Okay.
But
are you doing it in the voice? Like, what?
No, I'm not gonna do it in the voice. But like, it's an actual song. Like after I listened, it was like, what shall I render? What shall I give? What shall I offer for this life that I live? And then I was gonna go on further. But that's kind of what I came up with after listening to several black pastors preach it passionately. I was like so moved.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I've always thought it'd be really fun to just visit, and
Yeah.
it's like just a different taste of culture,
it's just a
like church
taste
culture.
of culture. It's a flavor that I love, and it's fun, and it's
I
the
think,
church.
well, and it's like, it's good to appreciate variety in preaching,
Mhm.
like. And I don't think that if a black pastor saw you
Yeah,
doing that, I don't think he would think, oh.
he would. I think he would give me the same. If he
Like,
knew
I
me.
think he would enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he appreciates the way we preach.
Well, I've been to black churches, and then they impersonate a white guy.
And it's probably hilarious.
And it's hilarious. And if they'll say what I've seen, and it was like complimentary. It's like, if you like a black pastor was talking about a white people. It's like white people, and they kind of like they're talking about. Like, here's how white people operate. They don't talk about whatever the thing is. What they talk about is what they're saving for their kids for college. And then everyone laughed, and I was like, huh, that is true. That's what white people
like most of it's when black people make fun of white people, it's like pretty much always accurate.
Yeah, it's nailed. It's right on, and it's fun. Anyway, I think that's where we maybe in a culture that has overcome a lot of darkness, and this might be the dark humor side, or maybe it's the healthy humor side, and I think that's the part where we need to do a better job of being able to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously.
Yes.
But at the same time, not you don't want to just sweep under the fact that our country has been really awful in many ways to people of color for many years, which is why I think it was a big deal to really kind of honor Martin Luther King for what he has done. Love the fact where we are in freedom. Now, you know, what's hard about Martin Luther King, and I don't know if you knew this, it's wild. It's like, you know how everyone has a scandal? Even Martin Luther King has a scandal. But that doesn't,
he's human.
Yeah, it doesn't take away from the freedom that he gave to our country.
Like what he stood for.
Yeah, it was so awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the guy had a past. It's like with Ravi Zacharias. You know who that is?
Yeah.
Like you can't talk about Ravi Zacharias because he was a dude that had just an awful past. And it's interesting that I think we're in a different age now. But in that day, MLK, you didn't have the social media coverage. You didn't have people digging up people's skeletons.
Right.
And so, anyway. So I'm super grateful that we do live in our country now, that he really paved the way for it and gave his life like sub 40, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, because racism still exists. I mean, people are still awful.
Right. And both ways.
But,
like,
yeah.
and it within your own race. And I think it's been extrapolated like 800 times. I think we think about race way more than we did before COVID.
Right. It's because social media.
It's been we fed into the great social media machine of being polarized on everything.
I remember being in high school, like middle school, high school, and I'm from a small town where like it was like half of us were
Pittsburgh, Texas, ladies and gentlemen.
Half of us were white, or maybe it was like a third white, third black, third Mexican. Like it was just like
a mix
of all of us. And I never really feel like I thought about race. Like it was just like we were all there and we were all friends. And
yeah, and and this is the part where, you know, when you're the majority culture for the most part, you don't think about race until you're not the majority culture.
Yeah,
and
I
I
can
think
see that.
And so I think that's what's hard now that we're on a race talk. But I think that's what's hard for people to hear white people say that. Like, I've never even thought about that. And like, exactly. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And you don't understand how hard it was for me. And I'm like, okay, I can see that.
Well, it's like you can't blame us for what we don't know.
Right.
Like it's like we want to learn and listen and
love and all the things.
yeah,
but the biggest piece of this is that going back to Exodus 21 is that God valued every person, and he said, even with among slaves, you want to treat them as you treat a brother. And that's wild to think about. Right. And so, or he said a hired worker, but what that meant is someone that was a Hebrew, like a brother in the sense of a Hebrew. And I think that's where we need to do a better job of looking at people. And I do appreciate, the one thing I do know about you, Katie, is you might not give any honor to a CEO or the president or anybody, but you also don't give any disrespect to a
janitor.
Right. I think you do a good job of that. And I think that's sort of the heartbeat, is that God doesn't show favoritism. We need to show respect and grace to everyone. But God does say, give honor to the king and anyone who has a position.
Right.
And,
I know.
And that's, that might be the part you work on.
No, I know. I'm aware.
Yeah. Because it helps move the gospel forward, and it shows civil respect, which is fine. Okay. Let's see. I think I have one. Do I have another question in here? Oh, here it is. In Exodus, if Moses wrote Exodus, why do you write it in third person? That is a great question. And a lot of the biblical writers wrote in third person. And I think that's a way a lot of prophets wrote. There were some times where prophets write in first person. Sometimes they write in third person. And that was a very, very normal way of writing. And so and you have to talk about Moses in the third person. That might seem odd. John does that as well. The gospel writer John, Matthew, Mark, and John all write in third person. Luke does a first person writing whenever it's first person, but then he goes to third person whenever he's not talking about himself. I think it's an adequate question. I think that sometimes that could make people feel like I don't trust the Bible, but I think it's just a way of writing that you're wanting to convey an impersonal view of this. And to be fair, for Moses, he did write himself in as the most humble man in all the earth. And so, you can't really deny that. And it would be really weird to write, since I'm the most humble guy that ever walked on the planet, so he was able to third person that. And I think he did have a relationship with God, and I think he was the most humble guy on the planet, but God had humbled him through some really tough circumstances. So I don't know. Does that bother you, Katie, that the Bible is...
No, I don't think that's something I think too hard about.
Yeah. I appreciate, so Nehemiah is written from a first-person perspective, and I really appreciate that. I can get into Nehemiah
He's telling a story.
It is a story, yeah, and it's more like, and there it was, and then this guy opposed.
He's telling his story.
Yeah, he's telling his story, and Moses is too, but I think Moses is telling it.
Everyone has different writing styles too. I mean, even back then, it's like
sure
based on. Now, I don't know what personalities were like.
Well, and remember, Moses wasn't writing for himself. He knew that what he was writing was going to last years beyond himself. Right. And so I think you might get lost in all the I's, and that might make it way easier to just write Moses. Yeah. And so if you know that makes a ton of sense on why you'd write it like that.
Yeah. It's like when you read anything that Paul wrote, it's like, you know it's Paul.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's actually really helpful. I think if you understood that Moses had a greater view. Now, some people don't think that Moses wrote tradition up until the 17th century. And this, I don't know if this. I'd love to hear if you care about this. Up until the 17th century, everyone thought Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then after that, everyone started debating it and saying like, well, no, that's not possible, and blah, 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 blah. Your thought on that?
Was Moses born then?
Remember Genesis, he obviously wasn't born for that, but he wrote Genesis. To me, it makes the most sense. So
how would Moses write Genesis?
If he wasn't around for the Genesis stuff?
Right. Like, how did he know about all this stuff? Because there's a lot of stuff
oral
in
tradition.
Genesis.
So it was written in a way that it was like a big box of poetry. and then it was formed,
He
passed
just
down,
gathered
passed down, and then he eventually wrote it down.
Because logically, it would make more sense if Noah wrote Genesis.
Right. Or Adam wrote his section,
Yeah,
and he
like
passed it on.
But I mean,
it was like that. They just passed it on orally, and then eventually Moses writes it down for the birth of this nation. It's not like it's not like, when Joseph, the son of Jacob, goes down to Egypt as a slave and goes to prison. It's not like he had a Bible to read to tell him that he could trust God no matter what. All he had was a couple promises that were passed down from his parents about what God had said. It was an oral tradition thing.
Right.
But eventually Moses comes along and he does write it down, and he gives us the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah. You ready to wrap this up?
Yeah. I feel like people might be a little...
Hey, if you're still watching, way to go. We love...
Might be miserable or you're either miserable or you're having fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you're having fun and getting a lot of cultural, vibes, along with a lot of history.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to text in and let us talk about anything that you got to share, 737-231-0605. Go to pastorplek.com. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you watch. Make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe. Love to get everybody influenced by God's word and the power that he has. And so if you want to let people know more about where we're at, you know how to do it. From our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.